Hi, I'm Drew Himmelrich.
Hi, I'm Alex Fasciolo.
I'm Kat Landry.
And I'm Kelly Simons.
And we have a group of 10 articles to talk to you about today and each other. They are McMahon High School could fund theater but won't. Chef creates life-size gingerbread house. Avatar theme park, Walt Disney World new attraction. Assisted suicide, a musical that asks us to think critically about the portrayal of euthanasia. Mike Pence responds to Hamilton cast statement. American theater artists, don't throw away your shot. Pop-up theater extends venues and audience experiences. ACTRA backs SAG-AFTRA video game strike. Judge allows bid to free We Shall Overcome from copyright. And a new model of female producers, the WP Lab. The first article we're going to talk to you about is the American Theater's article, American Theater Artists, Don't Throw Away Your Shot. This article is discussing the recent events at Hamilton with Mike Pence and other arts organizations that have followed suit in making their stance clear on discrimination.
I have read the statement that the cast approached Pence with, and it's not at all a personal attack on him, which I really appreciate. Like, I think they probably could have used their platform to make this very accusatory statement, but it was mainly more of a statement of welcoming and
It was a plea for them to hear, hear our voices.
Yeah,
if you watch the video, they subdued boos from the audience too.
Yeah.
They defended Mr. Pence.
which is
And for our YouTube watchers who might not know what was said, the actor Brandon Victor Dixon, who plays Aaron Burr, read a statement written by the producer. We, sir, are the diverse America who are alarmed and anxious that your new administration will not protect us, our planet, our children, our parents, or defend us and uphold our inalienable rights, sir. But we truly hope this show has inspired you to uphold our American values and to work on behalf of all of us. All of us. So, as you can see, it's not accusatory at all. It's as Alex said, it's a plea to be heard.
And if you haven't watched the video, I know many people have, but do watch the video because it's worth understanding the tone that it was spoken in, because that context, I feel like, is easily confusable.
Yeah, and I think it lays a wonderful foundation if future theater companies want to do this, as to the type of tone that they should be presenting in these kind of more public audience to cast member conversations.
Exactly, which is what this article goes on to talk about. So they're basically looking at the Los Angeles Theater Center and OSF, which is anybody.
I'll look it up.
It's a theater organization in Oregon, and they have not made
Oregon Shakespeare Festival.
Yeah,
I'm a genius. It's the Oregon Shakespeare Festival.
it's where there was an incident recently where there were There was an African American actress who was essentially verbally assaulted just while walking in Oregon. And as you were saying, the article is sort of about how theater should and is stepping up for what the theater makers believe in. And the line in Hamilton goes, don't throw away your shot. Essentially, the title of the article is saying that we have this opportunity to make change and to make our voices heard, and that it's important to do that and to do it appropriately, just as Hamilton did.
So, I got a question for you guys. Clearly this got a lot of publicity, and the President-elect, Mr. Trump, tweeted about it. He didn't receive it very well. And Mr. Pence also talked about it, saying that he said that he heard the message and that he wasn't offended and that he promotes the First Amendment and the right to petition your elected officials. But what do you think the chances are that this would have gotten so much publicity if it were not let's say Hamilton, the cast of Hamilton, just wanted to promote this message in a more subversive way, through the content of their piece.
Yeah.
Would their message Because, like, the show kind of does that.
Yeah.
Would their message get out to people that were more than just the people who could afford to see Hamilton? Or?
So, I think... I don't think there's an argument that it would be just as effective if this message had been delivered the same way it had, but Mike Pence hadn't been there. I think the fact that Mike Pence was there and it was a message directly towards Mike Pence was probably the biggest factor in its publicity, in its immense publicity. But I think that Hamilton in itself is a play about this diverse culture and what makes America great. And I think, I honestly think that they do different things, like their Ham for Hams. Lin-Manuel Miranda is a big activist, and all of that stuff is proof that they are sending this message to everyone, not just the people that are interested after this one big publicity event. And I think that's really important. I think it's important that they're not just finding this one point that they can, just because Mike Pence, they're making a statement. They've continually made a statement. I think that makes this statement even more valid.
Yeah, I would actually argue that the publicity is entirely unimportant for this, because I think while there is a message behind that, I think the important part is the fact that it is a plea specifically to Mike Pence. I think this conversation could have happened in a room with only the two of them and never gotten any coverage and be equally as important. Because I think there's a whole lot of the country, obviously, that feels they are not being heard or considered by our current president and vice president elects, which is entirely reasonable. But I think that these two men need to hear it. I think it's not necessarily that everyone in that house or everyone who watches the news needs to hear it, as much as these two people who actually hold a lot of people's fates in their hands need to hear it.
And one of our other articles, I think, which we can start discussing now, is about
yes,
the response. So that last article was primarily about theater's response and what theater can do, and the other article is about the response from Mike Pence.
Yeah, the article's called "Mike Pence Wasn't Offended by Hamilton Cast Statement."
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to see that the person that was actually there saw that the way that they handled the situation, the way that the cast handled the situation, was appropriate. The way they did it, at least in my opinion.
The person who was addressed to.
Yeah, the person who was addressed to. And then obviously it was clear that Donald Trump was very unhappy by this. I guess what he saw as embarrassing Mike Pence in front of, I guess, the entire nation.
Or
so
harassing.
Harassing. And I think it's really important to see that Mike Pence wasn't really offended by that, and he made it clear that he sort of subtly said he doesn't know if it was the right place to do it. I think it was the right place to do it, but in the end, he said they did it politely, and I think that's really what it comes down to.
I actually have, as much as I do not endorse Mike Pence, I have a lot of respect for the way he handled this situation, especially in contrast to his, not running mate anymore, I guess.
To Mr. Trump.
To Mr. Trump. And he said to his kids, he says, I nudged my kids and I reminded them that's what freedom sounds like.
Yeah.
And I had so much respect for his ability to say that, because I think we really have ignored throughout Mr. Trump's campaign. I think there was a lot of ignoring what America actually stands for and what we were built on, what our core beliefs are, and that is that yes, you can get booed anywhere you go.
The very First Amendment.
In fact, it's the number one.
The President-elect Trump, throughout his campaign, on his campaign trail, many times would send people out if they were booing him. At least the media covered that intensively. And I think it's
the media out.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to see that when Mike Pence hears this, he says that's freedom, as opposed to these people need to not be mean to me. And I think that's the contrast, and I think that's the contrast that a lot of people see between the president-elect and the vice president-elect. That maybe their ideals are pretty similar, but the the way that they handle situations, one is presidential and one is childish in that respect.
So, yes, I think the scary thing to me is so they cite the tweets at the bottom of this from Mr. Trump, and his two tweets about this situation were, "Our wonderful future VP Mike Pence was harassed last night at the theater by the cast of Hamilton, cameras blazing. This should not happen." And the cast and producers of Hamilton, which I hear is highly overrated, should immediately apologize to Mike Pence for their terrible behavior.
Terrible behavior.
And the thing that's horrifying to me about that is there are so many people who only read those tweets and now assume that that's what happened, as opposed to actually looking up that video and seeing what was actually a very humble plea for help.
And that's why some political experts think that Donald Trump could be impeached for violating the Constitution on his first day of office.
Please.
Seems unlikely, but...
Well, he's already potentially committed treason on the campaign trail.
Well, that's all right. That's
another
podcast.
That's
a podcast for
but
next week.
Here's something that that you didn't read that he also tweeted about the incident. The theater should be a safe space.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about that?
Because,
I think it's
because to a certain extent, I agree that theater should be a place where, respectful discourse should happen.
Yeah.
And if that's what you mean by safe space, I mean, you could certainly make that argument, but a safe space where no one gets made fun of, I don't know if Mr. Trump has visited any theaters and seen any shows, but satire is certainly something
exactly. The root of comedy comes from making fun of something or someone else.
And we did discuss this in our last podcast, so we won't go too much further into it just for that purpose. But yes, theater is inherently political, and there are so many.
I do think it's interesting on the article we discussed first. The Los Angeles theater put up a sign that said, "This theater is a safe space, and we respect everyone, no matter your background," essentially. And they were sort of saying it's a safe space on the end that we represent everyone, as opposed to a safe space where no one's going to be offended. So I think safe space has a lot of different definitions.
Yeah.
Well, there's a difference
trying to
between
spin the term.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between being a company that says this is a safe space for all different kinds of people, and saying theater should be a safe place where I am not challenged.
Yeah, yeah,
it's just it's him spinning a buzzword.
I think we can.
But let's move
to our next one.
Bring
it down a little bit.
Well, this won't bring us down.
Just kidding.
That
I completely lied.
Because our next article is McMahon High School could fund their theater program but won't.
I have some things to say about this.
Basically what's going on in this article is there is a high school in Connecticut, one town over from Mr. Fischel.
No, it's my hometown, actually.
Never mind. Yeah. It's his hometown. His mother teaches in the town over.
Yeah.
And we're looking at a situation where the high school has a very minimal budget for their theater productions, and they are looking at using the money that they could use to beef up the theater program to actually add on to the administrative salaries in the school, which are already upwards of $180,000 a year.
I think they're all up. They're
all over $150,000.
Yeah.
And the theater program is asking for $3,000. So
a total of $15,000 over the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
$3,000 a year.
One of these, the principal and the 4 housemasters would not have to even take $1,000 cut for their salary, and they're completely unwilling to do it.
Oh, it's not even a cut though. They want more on their salary.
They're gaining.
Their salary will stay the same. They just won't get a lot of
their salaries would stay the same, but they're growing.
So obviously, as being someone in the theater world, I'm all for theater education. I think it should be funded as much as possible. I mean, the reason most people are at this school is because we had a good high school theater experience. At least the undergrads had a good high school theater experience, and then wanted to continue doing that immediately after high school. And I think it's hard to sort of have that experience if your school is underfunded. Granted, there are plenty of students here who did really great work and had tons of potential and who came here with an underfunded theater program, but I think it's easier and more enjoyable for people if it's well funded. So with that said, I also don't think that the administration should necessarily be taking the pay increases, but we have to keep in mind that there's more than just theater in this school, I'm sure, and more people want these financial gains than just the theater department, and let's say it's $3,000 a year, that could definitely go to the theater department, and I think it should go to the theater department, but what about the science department? What about the math department? I think it's hard to pick and choose where some of this funding goes to, and again, I can't speak for the school, but it's possible that they said, we have this minimal money, it would be unfair to give it to anyone, let's give it to these employees that work 70 hours a week, maybe, at the school. And I think in that respect, it might not be fair to the theater students, but all in all, I think we need to keep in mind that our biases are sort of taking a play in that.
So, well, first, I think I want to correct something. Like, this is a 15, like, the administrators, 5 of them would be splitting a $15,000, like, $15,000 for this 1 year, which the theater department says would fund them for the next 5 years.
Oh, I see.
So
okay.
For me, the argument falls apart with the whole departmental thing, where like that there are 4 other departments that like could valid like between now and the time that the theater could use another fund, like a $15,000 grant. There are 4 other departments that could benefit from $15,000 a year, and instead it's going into the pockets of administrators. And like my mom is in public education in Westport, Connecticut, where I went to high school, and they put me in that high school because the education in Norwalk is not as good as it is in Westport for funding reasons. I wrote about this in my comment regarding the article, but I would have gone to Norwalk High if I didn't go to school in Staples, and which is the Westport public high school. And I'm here essentially because Staples High School funds the arts, like
because their administrators are willing to
yeah,
take a salary
absolutely, and I can speak to that. Like I'm here because they threw like more than $3,000 a year at the program, and there are plenty of people who graduated from my high school who, on both the performance and the production side, go into the industry, and like it's a thing that happens at that high school. Like there's like a trajectory, like or it's a high school, but like there's the hopes of a trajectory from this high school, and what I think is almost more important than the dollar amount is the emphasis on you can make this your career.
Yes.
That comes.
Yeah.
That's assigned.
Yeah, and sometimes the dollar amount is a little bit crucial in that. Like, I mean, I have always loved theater. Like since I was a child, like I took like a stone that was in our woods behind the house and like declared it the stage. Like that was no budget, but being in high school and working with a certain amount of budget and learning to be a stage manager and working with equipment, that was when I said, oh, this could actually be a career choice. And I think it's a lot of it isn't so much the money as it is saying we value the arts in this school. And I want to call out this line in the article that says, when budgets are tight, sacrifices need to be made. I would just like to see the administrators at the high school sacrifice a small percentage of their salaries to allow their students to perform. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really important, just, I mean, even money aside, as a gesture, saying this means something to our school, this means something to our administrators, that we are willing to sacrifice a raise in order to provide opportunity for our students. And I think that's really where the core issue is that there is not enough value placed on all of the great things that can come from being a part of a performing arts, because it's not even just a starting point for a theatrical career, but it's huge for collaboration in many different areas. There are companies all over the place who are saying, oh, we want to hire people who do theater, we want to hire creative people, because those are the people that are able to bring life to these companies that are all people who have studied business their whole lives, which is fine, but there's something to a creative education that really enhances the way people work.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of a balanced education,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, yeah, you can value engineering, you can value business sense, you can value STEM topics, but like you have to look at the whole picture especially in terms of like an early education, like and like I know in Norwalk, a lot of the people who like go to McMahon, like not everyone who goes to that high school goes to college, right? Like any place. So the fact that like the arts are particularly not being funded, it makes me sad.
It makes me sad too. But before we get even more sad,
let's
move on to a giant gingerbread
this is
house.
the upper we need at this point.
So the next article is a chef creates life-size gingerbread house, and that's pretty self-explanatory. He created a giant gingerbread house that is 12 feet
really
tall.
big.
Wow.
12 feet tall, 14 feet long, and 12 feet deep.
So the article talks about how in the past there was sort of this facade that they created, or large gingerbread structures and things like that. But this time, it's actually sort of an interactive thing. It's not a house per se, but it is an interactive structure that you can go inside of. And I think that's really cool. I think usually you think of a gingerbread house. Well, I think always you think of a gingerbread house. And yeah, it's something that sits on a table. And I think it's really cool to see something. Just like it's cool to see big things small. I think it's really cute. I think it's really cool to see small things really big, and to take a gingerbread house and make it that big. I'm really curious how they made the gingerbread, how long it took them to create all of the pieces.
If they made like bricks and then he
Or
just
if they
kind of
made, like,
masoned them
usually-
together, or
no,
if it was like
usually
drywall
It looked like he made.
Usually
I
it's
don't think
really-
it was drywall sheets, but it looked like he was making
Large.
really thick,
Yeah.
fairly large size pieces. And
I
just-
watched a Food Network show on this. So resident
Wow.
expert. I'm just kidding. And they typically do like really, really big slabs of it and sort of
Big
put it
slabs.
on a structure that they've already created underneath.
Hmm.
But I just wanted, so when you were talking about like being able to walk into it, I really liked the last few lines of this article. It says, guests pause to watch his progress, and a little girl ducked inside, grinning beneath the ceiling's twinkling white lights. Tenant, icing on his cheek, gingerbread dust flying from his saw, smiled and went back to work.
Okay, the mention of the saw is so cool because that means he's actually cutting pieces
He's
to
sawing
fit,
gingerbread.
as opposed to baking them in the size that he needs.
Yeah, it's just a really cool.
And I commented on this, that this is essentially what we do. At least as a
But with
technical director,
gingerbread.
it's building things that usually you wouldn't build, or you build something that just needs to look a certain way. And I think it's really cool that this is a project that actually happens. I don't think we would ever build a set out of gingerbread.
One country.
Yeah, but I think it's cool that this,
Yeah,
I guess,
hopefully
themed
not.
environment type thing, which is also something technical directors work on, is this gingerbread structure.
I mean, it also
Yeah, it's really
represents like the type of project that like a person who comes from this background could easily get involved with, even
Oh,
though
yeah.
they've never done. Like I think it's so cool that like a person from here could like team up with a baker and like make a house of gingerbread. Like,
So that's the premise of the Food Network show.
Yeah.
Is basically so there's a carpenter and there is a baker, and they come together, and like there's some other so there's
My cousin told me I should be on that show.
Yes, no, I thought the same thing when I watched it. So basically,
so we should eat
That I should be
trees.
on
there's somebody who comes up with sort of the overall vision for the gingerbread house, and then the carpenter comes up with how the actual structure underneath it is going to work, and then the baker bakes.
Awesome.
So the carpenter is like busy building this mini house, and then the baker comes out with like all the gingerbread, and then they put everything together, and it's
do
very
that.
cool.
What's it called?
It's I don't remember. I can look it up.
That's pretty cool. I mean,
But yeah,
I think in my comment I said this is something I can show people to explain what I do. I take things, just like as a technical director, we take things and try to make them happen, as ridiculous as they might be.
All-Star
this is the
Gingerbread
episode
build.
I watched. Yeah, All-Star Gingerbread Build. Check it out.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, there's the guys from the they have their own show where they renovate houses.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
The brothers?
Yeah, the brothers.
Yes,
Yeah.
the brother
the
builders.
bakers and the brother builders.
But anyway, so that's a cool thing that
So
people
nice.
like us can get involved in.
Yeah.
And it's a short-term gig.
Combination between DIY Network and Food Network. It's hard to beat that.
And who doesn't want to play with 800 to 900 pounds of gingerbread?
I wonder, like, if you could eat that. Like,
Well,
when it's
people.
done.
So there was also a line in the article.
Or if you
where-
want to eat that.
So
Like,
it's
Is that
You
an
probably
unholy
don't,
abomination of gingerbread and, like, caulk?
yeah.
Or,
Well, exactly. You don't want to eat it, but they do have candies around it, and it says some visitors can't resist trying to break off a sample from the exterior, which tenant says is edible. Sometimes you will see a fingerprint in the piping or candies missing, and they haven't fallen onto the floor. Which I think
That's
is really
good.
funny that people are just walking up and eating it.
I mean, like, you present something that's edible, people will want to eat it. It's like leaving an open pizza box in the lobby. It's gonna go.
Maybe.
That's a whole other discussion.
Yeah.
So let's move on from that. Our next article is Disney World's newest Avatar theme park is the most magical thing we've ever seen.
So I'm, again, like, the interactive idea is pretty incredible. I'm really excited for that. I'm really excited that it's going to be something you can actually walk through as opposed to something you just see. My fear is that it's going to be a lot of... So typically things like this are made out of fiberglass, and I don't know what they're going to make stuff like this out of. But I think what's really interesting about the movie is it's these things that look like they're living species, and I think it's going to be hard to recreate that in a condition that can be trampled on every day and touched by thousands of kids, but also look like it's a plant or it's a living thing and not some glossy fiberglass. So I think that's going to be a challenge. Maybe they already have a solution. I don't really know, but just seeing that there's one thing to make a rendering image, and there's one thing to actually be able to turn that rendering image into the real product, and I think that's going to be a fun challenge for whatever company builds that.
The solution to that, and I'm scrolling down the article, and it looks like this picture. You guys can't see it, but this picture is like a raft where you like experience the world, but not like directly. You're taken through the world.
This is the Navi River ride.
Yeah, and I think that might be the savior in this type of situation where things can exist in a way that, like, yes, the public experiences them, but they don't like break it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't trample all over
I'm
it.
curious what they did to actually build the movie set. I know a lot of it was CGI, but I would hope that they talked to whoever built the movie set or took those images to sort of create this stuff for the actual park.
I mean, the other thing is theme parks have been building, touchable, walkable worlds for years. I don't imagine that it will be subpar on that front. I think one of the bigger controversies that's come out of having Pandora in Animal Kingdom is just that the popularity for the movie sort of fizzled out extremely quickly.
It was as soon as it left theaters, pretty much.
And
Because you had to see it in
so cinematic.
theaters.
I still haven't seen the movie.
Me neither. I kind of
and most people who saw the movie really enjoyed it, but there wasn't something to really tether them to it, so it didn't really become much of a continuing fan base. There wasn't a lot of support for it afterward.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would be one of my bigger concerns about it. On the other hand, it is just a beautiful world to create. So I think it will still be successful, and it also I think will make a good addition to
Log Mountain.
Animal Kingdom.
It's so interesting that they're choosing this movie to go off of as opposed to a more Disney movie, Disney has made so many fantasy worlds. It's interesting that they didn't choose to do like Arendelle as a interactive something. Because
So
it
I
has
think
such
I
a
have the
huge
answer.
cult following.
I think I have the answer to that question.
Yeah,
And I
well,
think-
exactly. Avatar is the second. highest
So
grossing.
here's a list of the highest grossing films adjusted for inflation, according to Wikipedia. And Avatar is number 2 with
and Star
3 billion with a B,
So
20 million gross revenue from the film.
It's also followed by Star Wars, which they also recently acquired.
And then also followed by Titanic.
It's
I don't think
pretty clear what they're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean,
Gone
Gone with the Wind. Yeah,
And I think it's hard to argue that Avatar doesn't have a fan base because I think it clearly.
It certainly does. It's
Yeah,
just
I
not
think
huge.
it definitely has. I mean, I think it has a pretty large fan base, and I think if one of the perks was seeing it in theater, and that's a big thing, even better is actually being inside the world.
And
so,
here's
I mean,
another
I
thing.
don't see. I think it's going to be pretty successful. I guess my concern is that like the interactive places that they've made before. For example, I drew a comparison with this to their Honey, I Shrunk the Kids at MGM Studios or whatever it's called now, which is for me, as I mentioned in my comment, it's one of my favorites not because it's well done, because honestly it's not really that well done, but because it's the idea of you can totally immerse yourself and choose where you go, and it's not a ride that you sit in a boat and see the world. It's not just houses on the side of the street. It's you're actually in this and you can explore, and I think that's what's really cool, and I hope this is like that. I just hope they are able to produce it and fabricate it really well.
Here's another thing. Because you've been to Disney World, like the original Disney World, right? I assume,
The original
like in
ago.
California.
You mean Disneyland?
Disneyland.
Yes.
Disneyland. Sorry,
That's
Log-
the shit
Log
I
we
was
Mountain.
wanted.
like,
Log Mountain's still a thing, right?
Log Mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the water ride. I don't know. The one, this
Splash Mountain.
Splash Mountain.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of Disney, but like, so that ride is based off a Song of the South, which has no fan base because it doesn't exist in this country and
Well,
hasn't
exactly.
since the '80s. So
Yeah, I mean, some of the greatest things come with things without fan base. Take
Right,
like
like-
Waterworld at Universal Studios Hollywood is a stunt show based on a movie from the '80s that literally
movie,
no one liked. It was a horrible movie.
It was so bad.
But it takes
it might take a life of its own.
the important thing exactly is the experience that you get from it once it's been created. And I think I mean they're going to do a great job. If any of you have seen the videos that have come out lately of the animatronics that they have of the I don't know, the creatures in Pandora, it's amazing. It's got to be the most realistic
Are they anything
animatronic
like
I've ever
Briar
seen.
Fox and Splash Mountain?
No, they're not like Briar Fox, and it's absolutely beautiful. So they're really stepping up the technology.
Yeah.
I think they're gonna do.
Yeah, I'd
They're
like
gonna
to
do
see.
great things
I'd like
with
to see some articles that come out after this thing opens, and like maybe some behind the scenes of how they do that.
yeah.
That would be an interesting look. But it sounds like we might want to move on to our next.
Oh boy.
Yes.
We're going to
Moving
move
right
on
along.
to our next article, which
Just when we
is
thought we were being happy.
Assisted Suicide the musical.
Okay, so I watched a documentary about this assisted suicide.
Resident expert.
No. And I honestly have no qualms about this topic. I really think that the people who are choosing to do this are sane of mind, and they know what they want, and they're living with so much physical pain that this is the best release that they can find. So I completely agreed with the whole topic. I do understand how it can be kind of an icky topic to discuss, and how many doctors have fallen under scrutiny if they assist in any of this. But the documentary that I watched, it was very gentle how this happened. They hook you up to an IV, and they put a ring around your finger, and when you are ready to go, you pull down on it. The only thing that the doctor does is get you the fluid in the IV and hook you up. You actually pull the ring to decide when this is happening to you.
Yeah, and so this article is talking about how euthanasia is being expressed in entertainment. So it talks about the movie Me Before You, which has gotten a lot of criticism on a few different angles. Essentially, I haven't seen the movie, but essentially what I'm getting from this is that there is a man who has been paralyzed, and he wants to commit suicide. And he is supposedly traveling to Switzerland because there he is able to get assisted suicide. And there's a whole romance going on, and from what I have heard about it, and I don't know if this is accurate because it wasn't brought up in the article, but from what I have heard, there there was some upset over this, just because I guess in real life, the man this happened to, he did not actually kill himself, but in the movie they did have him commit suicide, so it was an issue. He did want to until he met this woman, and then he decided to live. But then in the film, he did end up taking his life, and there was a whole "what, you don't think my life is worth living now that I'm paralyzed" type of issue. So there's already some controversy around it.
I mean, I think it's important to think about the idea of that. If someone wants to do this, then I think they understand both sides of what could happen. I think they understand what their life would be like if they didn't. I think they understand what the ending of their life would be like for their family and friends. And I think it's important that we respect their decision and let people do what they want. But I think what the musical is about is just sort of bringing to light in a fun, positive way this idea that people should be able to make their own choices, and that it's not something to be ashamed of. But I don't know, I think it's a fun way to do it. Obviously, there are other aspects or other representations of this within pop culture and within entertainment, and I think this is another way. And putting it in musical form, as the person who it's about, or who sort of has been the primary writer of it, said, she's looking for something to express her thoughts on it, and she wanted to do it in a fun way. She didn't want to be people just standing there giving you monologues. She wanted that, but also with the fun of musical theater.
Yeah, it's interesting that this came from a member within the community of people who are disabled or
I think that's the only community it can come from.
Yeah, well, it didn't with the
well, exactly, which is why there was such an uproar.
And I actually had I tried to find this out. I couldn't find her position on this, whether it was Liz Carr.
She in one of the videos on it, she respects everyone's decision, but she herself would not choose to.
Yeah, well, obviously she's still around, I guess, but that's not exactly how I wanted to phrase that. But I think it was interesting that she wanted to portray that community in a positive light, which is
great, because obviously we're not getting an accurate portrayal of that so far in entertainment. So her taking that step is, I think, a really important an important step to take in the process of bringing this into conversation.
Yeah, it's important to look at the issue more than as a tragedy. It can be a celebration of life.
Yeah, I agree.
Next.
So our next article is Pop-Up Theater Extends Venues and Audience Experiences. And what we're looking at in this article is essentially a theater company without a venue. So it's exploring the interaction between audience and performer, and essentially creating a flash mob for theater in different spaces.
I think it's awesome. I think it's a flash mob, and it's not really a new concept. It's a new concept of calling it theater, maybe, what this group is doing, but the idea of a flash mob that's done. There's thousands of YouTube videos of people doing flash mobs, people doing sort of practical jokes on each other in public, and I think that's essentially what this is. Maybe it's a more formal or more theatrical than a flash mob or an Impractical Jokers type thing.
I think more subtle. More subtle.
But I think it's really interesting, and I think it's really cool, and hopefully they find me somewhere.
I don't know. I think it could be really interesting, but I also think that if I were surprised with a performance, that has inherent shock value, which could be valuable, but it also could really piss me off.
Well, it's not quite like that. It's not quite like somebody pops up behind you and starts singing a
song.
Well,
no, I know.
It's
I know that.
It's so they gave one example where this man shows up in a bar that would typically play popular music. And he sits down with a keyboard and he starts playing Beethoven. And it's just about changing the space. It's about looking at the way, it's about changing the way you look at where you are. There was another instance that they talked about where they go into a restaurant and they have a performer who has scripted lines that he's memorized, and they walk up to a woman and they give her this script, and they ask her to go and interact with this man, and it's something small. It's just something to sort of wake people out of their everyday and just say, hey, look at this. We're going to talk about this right now.
Yeah, and that's cool. But I do think that this has the potential to be received negatively, and if it is,
definitely, I'm sure
there's so many wrong ways to do it.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
I'd love to experience this so I could speak more intelligently.
I have no idea, but just like from my experience with people, I would say probably 95%. And again, this is a complete guess. I would say like 95% of the people that they try doing this to are just immediately frustrated by it and don't want to have anything to do with it. But I think when it works and when they engage people, I think that's worth it, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it might slip into kind of like when you get accosted on the street by someone trying to sell you something, or like in the mall at those middle kiosks.
Yeah.
Like it could so easily slip into something where people just kind of like laugh and keep walking.
I don't have money.
Yeah, I think these
people... exactly, please.
I think these people recognize that, and I think they're handling it pretty responsibly.
Yeah.
It seems that they're choosing spaces where people are sort of already like out and doing something, and they're like already established in this space. It's just shifting that space into being something else.
Yeah, and again, the other thing, usually you go to theater not necessarily to escape reality, but it's a fun way to look at things differently, and I think it's really cool to be bringing that to someone.
Yeah. They also, like you said, they make a good point about like there aren't so many people who are willing to dedicate 3 hours of their time to go and see theater. So what if we bring theater to them?
Yeah,
which I think is a great idea. You just got to make sure that execution is good.
Yeah.
Moving right along. This is a little.
So our next article is Canadian Performers Union ACTRA backs SAG-AFTRA video game strike. So basically, what's going on is there have been actors cast to be voices in video games without knowing beforehand what the video game is, what the content is that they'll be portraying, and they are also not getting paid fair wages.
So you could get hired, like you could accept a contract, and then it turns out that your character in the game is just a horrible.
Or it does not represent the values that you wish for your
that you are struggling so hard to do your job while also remaining firm in your beliefs that it's causing so many schisms.
Yeah. I was kind of shocked to see that, because you usually don't think of any part of an audition being not knowing what you're auditioning for. If someone's going in for an audition, I would think, normally know what they're doing, and I think it's a little weird that...
Well, an audition, maybe that could happen, but, like, certainly signing a contract...
Yeah,
But games can have huge rewrites to them.
Yeah, and
like, they can alter the content.
There are plenty of people that play villains that aren't actually villains, so I think depending on the actor, it's not really... It doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense to me, and again, I don't really know, I'm not in that position, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to turn down a position because I think they're a bad person. Because oftentimes actors play villains, and it's every single thing. But if it's a game that, for example, if you're against gun violence and you totally don't want any video games with gun violence, then you're signing a contract to be a voice for Call of Duty, then I think that's a reasonable place to start saying, you know what, I don't want to support this endeavor.
Yeah, I mean, this whole thing sort of makes me a little bit uncomfortable, because lately we've been having some conversation within the school about the fact that we, as School of Drama students, are put onto our shows without any discussion. We're just assigned to them, and it's sort of the same situation for the actors, where they have one large audition, which I imagine may be happening with these voice actors. They have one large audition, and then from that pool, they are assigned to different shows, to different roles. And within that, like, we've been talking about what is our level of responsibility to the content that the school is producing when it becomes uncomfortable for us. And so I think, just dealing with sensitive content issues, dealing with emotionally troubling shows that we might not have taken out in the real world, I think that same feeling sort of strikes a nerve with what's going on with these video game voiceover actors, because there are things that you don't want to be associated. There are things that you don't want to go through the process of creating because it is potentially harmful to you during the process. And I think it's certainly something that needs to be addressed.
And all of that can be resolved by just being able to say no at the beginning, right? Like
hopefully, but obviously it's not happening.
Yeah, but like if the union gets what they want,
yeah.
and I hope they do.
Yeah.
Like it's one thing to be once you're on board and once you've said yes, and if you kind of knew where it was going, to be like, I don't want to do this anymore. Or it's one thing if you're doing it for the paycheck, but like because sometimes we have to do stuff for, like, as people who produce theater, we have to, by being on a show, kind of support a message that may not align 100% with our core values, but and there's, like, I don't know where it is, but, like, there certainly is a certain amount of understanding that you're a part of a whole and you're not the person making that decision. But, like,
there's an argument for leaving that production.
Yeah, and you can also certainly do that. Like, I feel like it's just a little ridiculous to not know what you're signing up for.
Well, exactly, and that seems to be what's happening.
Right, like, so many issues could be resolved if people were just like, you know what, I know what this is about, I'm not about that, thank you for the opportunity, I'm going to politely decline, based upon an issue.
Yeah, so on to our next legal issue. The next article is Judge Allows Bid to Free We Shall Overcome from Copyright. Basically, we are looking at the song We Shall Overcome and putting it back into public domain as opposed to having it be copyrighted.
I think it's sort of funny to see these things. It's things that you never would expect are copyrighted, which, if you think about it a little bit more, you say, oh yeah, probably that is copyrighted, and how much people get away with it, and how it's sort of pointless to even keep fighting for the copyright. But we see that there is still a fight for the copyright.
Well,
I think we're fighting the good fight.
An interesting thing is that, like, this lapsed copyright, but another version of the song sung by, was it Pete Seeger?
Well, here's where the argument is coming in, is this isn't even the original song that's been copyrighted. Mm-hmm. I believe it was
the original song was in 1948, and then the song that Pete Seeger sung was in 1963.
Yes.
And the article says that the differences between the two come in only 3 words, like, wheel is substituted for I'll, shall is substituted for will, and deep is substituted for down. Yeah. And those are the only 3 words that have changed, and it's a new piece of work.
Well, that's the 1948 version, but apparently the most recent one is considered original enough to merit protection. So the issue that's going on right now is it original enough to merit protection? Do we say that that song entered public domain back when it was supposed to, or do we say that it still has some time being copyrighted because of the rewrite that happened?
Yeah, I mean, like, this happens all the time. Like, that's why public domain is a thing where you can take aspects of culture after the artist who created it has profited from it in a fair way. The public can take aspects of culture that are still relevant and mash them up to create new things. Well, I think we're trying to pull the charger on the laptop. No, the computer. All right. Well, so anyway, like, the public domain is important because, like, that's how new things are created. Yeah. Like old building, like, the old culture can be used as building blocks for new culture. Like, Frankenstein has been adapted into, like, a whole bunch of stuff.
Simply because it
entered the public domain.
It allows for further creativity, which is important.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I just think it's a little silly that just because someone else sung the song means that the whole song.
Well, like, because it was rewritten, but yeah.
Yeah. Like, it would be one thing if the recording was still under copyright, or the right to sing in that, like, I don't know. That becomes a particular red tape rat's nest.
Yes. Well, in that case, let's move on. We are running low on time anyway. So our next article is called "A New Model of Female Producers: The WP Lab."
This is so exciting to read. I mean, I know for a fact that I'm entering a very male-dominated field, and that's just what technical direction is currently. So to read an article like this, where we're learning about all these young women professionals who are going in and kind of paving the way for the younger generation like myself, is just so hopeful. I very much admire these women and all the work that they're doing to help me. Personally, me.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's a great idea, sort of this organization, this theater group. I mean, I think the work they're doing is really important for the future of theater, and to make sure that everyone feels welcome, and people who inherently, based off the way theater is currently running and the way sort of society's running, people who inherently are going to have a harder time potentially finding work are put on an equal surface. And I think we shouldn't need that institution that creates it an equal surface, but just based off the way things are running right now, I think it's really good that we're able to create that.
Yeah, I mean, there's incredibly low representation of women as directors, as producers, and that I think is mainly what the article is focusing on. And just the fact that there is a band of women that are meeting together and gaining new members and creating theater together. They have this festival that they create theater for, I think is just so important.
It's a good network.
Because, it's a great network for all of the women in it, and it's also a great example for the rest of the theater artists, female theater artists in the country.
Yeah, and I think that is.
Yes,
that is our
podcast for you.
Thank you very much.